Hey guys, Greg coming at you with the vinyl rundown on a cold, rainy day in Los Angeles. I got my brand new Ben Sherman guitar shirt on that I got for Christmas. Ben Sherman is a designer, not a guitar player. This is a video about my latest Goodwill thrift store haul, 10 records I got. And I gotta be honest, the Goodwill thrift store stuff is getting way out of hand. I'm buying way too many cheap records, and I just I can't stop going. Okay, I go after work on a Friday thinking, all right, I'll start the weekend with some good stuff. And this Friday turns out two giant stacks of records had just appeared within the hour. They were still on the cart that comes out, when they push the stuff out into the store, like two stacks of 50. And I'm sitting there chatting with some older guy, and we're talking about jazz records, and he starts asking me about what kind of equipment I have, and he's into Macintosh tube amps. Pretty cool older dude, jazz fan. So anyway, you meet a lot of cool people at these thrift shops sometimes. The other lesson is, as my son keeps reminding me, Dad, you brought home 10 kind of okay records. Why don't you buy one or two good records? Start out with a very strong cover, but not a very well-known record. This is called Angel Eyes by Dave Brubeck Quartet, 1965. And look at this model. Wow, that is a heck of a photo. Terry Reno is her name, and she did a lot of modeling in the 60s, and she did some TV show stuff, but not very well known as an actress. Anyway, Angel Eyes is the title track, and there's a famous song called Angel Eyes written by a guy named Matt Dennis. I'm not that familiar with, but Brubeck did a whole album of songs written by the same guy, Matt Dennis, and Matt Dennis did the liner notes on the back, and he calls it A Composer Writes About His Performer. So it's Matt Dennis talking about his relationship with Dave Brubeck. It's your typical Brubeck record. You should listen to Dave Brubeck because of his great saxophone player, Paul Desmond, but Brubeck's certainly a good piano player. So anyway, $2 for this nice record, very clean condition. Then we come to another album with an interesting lady on the cover. This is a classic Exotica record by a singer named Ima Sumac. And she's like from Peru, so this whole Peruvian, Inca, Mesoamerica thing that they're going for. This record is actually from 1950, so this may be the oldest vinyl record I have. That's going to be 70 years pretty soon. This Ima Sumac lady is known for having one of the most amazing vocal ranges, like of anyone. Depending who you ask, her vocal range is between 4.5 or 5 or even 6 octaves, and that's an amazing, amazing vocal range for a singer. So she hits these super high notes. Sounds like a little birdie, but she does it, still in tune and all that. This record came out on 78 first. So back in those days, the early 50s, they were still releasing stuff. Here's the mention of the other 78 release. They were still releasing stuff on 78 and LP at the same time, side by side. LPs had just come out. People didn't know that LP would overtake 78. They assumed it would, but you never know. So the problem with this record, I got to be honest with you, the Goodwill is now putting these gigantic stickers on their records. And they put this one right over her hand, and I tried to pull it off carefully. I used some chemicals, and it still ripped off some of the paper. So the nice thing about this record is the cover, to be honest. The cover is kind of cooler than listening to the record itself. And I have ruined the cover by ripping off the sticker. I'm kind of annoyed with that, annoyed with myself. I should have been more careful. I guess I'll get over it. All right, next record is by Stan Getz, the greatest of Stan Getz. Does that mean it's his greatest hits? Well, not exactly. This record is on an old label called Roost Records. Let me show you the label. Royal Roost. This is a kind of a not very well-known jazz label. Roost, or Royal Roost, was a jazz club in New York that was popular with the bebop guys. Actually, it was a chicken restaurant before it was a jazz club, so the name Roost. I guess that's hilarious, supposedly. So this period is before Stan Getz was really well known for his, he's later known for his bossa nova stuff. But there was a period where he was a bebop guy, and then he sort of combined his cooler, mellower West Coast jazz style with the bebop. And that's what this record sounds like. It's not Girl from Ipanema and all that era stuff. It's bebop stuff, but maybe a little cooler West Coast edge. One song he did on here, Dear Old Stockholm, I didn't realize he wrote that song. That's kind of a jazz standard that's been recorded by Miles and all those other people. And apparently Getz spent a lot of time in Scandinavia, married a Swedish woman, and spent some time in Copenhagen. Stan Getz later stuff was all on the Verve label, and actually you can kind of see it behind me up here. Getz and Gilberto, Girl from Ipanema, the whole Brazilian and bossa nova thing. So sort of related to that is this record I got at the Goodwill. Antonio Carlos Jobim, the composer of Desafinado Plays, i.e. Jobim is singing and playing his own tune. So he wrote a lot of great Brazilian tunes. One Note Samba, How Insensitive, Girl from Ipanema, Corcovado. But this is him just playing those songs on guitar. So the Stan Getz version of most of these songs is probably more famous and probably more interesting, but nice record on Verve. And then another record on Verve, Tjader, Shades of Jade. So that's kind of a play on words, Tjader and Jade. Jade being associated with Asia. So this is a record. It's kind of a hokey compilation of Asian-themed tunes set to jazz sort of style. Tjader is a vibes player, and he was more famous on the Fantasy label. And actually, I like that stuff better because that was more jazz combo style. And back when he was doing stuff on Fantasy, he did a lot of stuff with Vince Guaraldi, the piano player from the Charlie Brown record fame you may all know. So this record, it's a bigger band, more orchestrated. Got some good players on it. Instead of Vince Guaraldi on piano, you've got Lalo Schifrin, who is more known as a composer and arranger. And he's more famous for the Mission Impossible soundtrack. But you also have a few other cool players on here. Clark Terry on trumpet. And there's a whole giant orchestra. I'm not going to go through all of them. Ed Shaughnessy. Do you guys know who that is? Ed Shaughnessy was the drummer for the Johnny Carson band for decades. Ed Shagnasty, they used to call him. I met him right down the street here coming out of the post office a couple years before he died. So anyway, that's Tjader. Okay, what else did we get? Some more jazz. Really old record. Gene Krupa doing the music of Jerry Mulligan. Gene Krupa, the great big band drummer. And Jerry Mulligan, probably the most famous baritone sax player of all time. You know, I'll get stuff like this for $2 because it's old and it sounds all right. All right, here's another record from a lady you all recognize, Nancy Sinatra. This is called Movin' with Nancy, the soundtrack from her television special. Well, it's really a collection of studio recordings. It's not a live television special recording. Got some of her hits on it. The one song that I really like on here is called Some Velvet Morning, written by and sung as a duet by Lee Hazelwood, who recorded a lot of country hits. One of the weirdest, coolest songs of the 60s, in my opinion. You should check out that song, Some Velvet Morning. It's very eerie. It switches back and forth between minor and major key, 3/4 time, 4/4 time. Check that out. That's kind of the reason I got this record, to have a clean copy of that tune. The Strauss tune, Also sprach Zarathustra, a famous piece that everybody knows because of 2001 Space Odyssey, this time conducted by Eugene Ormandy and Philadelphia Orchestra. I got a bunch of copies of this, but this cover art was so bizarre, I thought I would check it out. It's this glass mask or sculpture, and it says, "An awesome sonic experience." So this was 1975. 6 years after, maybe 6 or 7 years after 2001 Space Odyssey came out, and everybody was recording that piece. There's probably a zillion recordings by classical orchestras that came out right after the movie. All right, last one is, which direction does it go? Deodato. Deodato is a Brazilian keyboardist, and he plays mostly electric piano on this. So that was, his last name was also his band name. I can't pronounce his first name. Amir Deodato. I've seen this record at thrift stores a bazillion times and never picked it up. And I always thought, okay, it's kind of cheesy. It's not real jazz. It's not real jazz, but I'll try it. But I became interested lately because of this label that it's on, CTI, which stands for Creed Taylor Inc. Creed Taylor, he actually produced some of these other records here. I think he produced the Cal Jader. Creed Taylor founded the Impulse Jazz label, which, John Coltrane, he actually signed John Coltrane. So he's a big shot in the jazz production world. And turns out the label that he created later in life, CTI, the 70s, pretty good sounding stuff. Even though it's not kind of the classic jazz era of the 50s and 60s, it's more modern, slick production. So Deodato, he's got a copy, or I should say a recording of the Strauss song on here, Also sprach Zarathustra, that his hip jazz funk version of that was nominated for a Grammy that year. Let me show you the inside. It's got a double artsy black and white photo of the man himself, Deodato. A lot of really good players on here. On bass we have Ron Carter and Stanley Clarke. Two different songs. You don't need two bass players on the same song, obviously. Billy Cobham, the great fusion drummer, is on here. So I'm looking for more of these CTI label records. Really nice glossy covers, kind of artsy cover art. And oh, Deodato. So he's still around. He went on to produce a lot of bands, and actually, here's the Deodato trivia for the day. His granddaughter is married to a Canadian singer you may have heard of named Justin Bieber. That's right, Deodato's grandkid is married to Justin Bieber, so the musical legacy lives on with Deodato. Okay, guys, so that's 10 records from the Goodwill, and I've cleaned them all, and I'm actually doing another video on the spin clean system. Here it is. This thing contains the filthy water of those 10 records, and I will upload that video also. Some of my thoughts on the spin clean, which I use all the time because I buy tons of thrift shop records. All right, guys, so please subscribe if you like this, and leave some comments, and I will check you soon.